Hello, and welcome to the Beyond B2B Marketing podcast. I'm your host, Lee Oden, CEO of Top Rank Marketing, and today we're talking with one of the smartest marketers that I know. We go back nearly 9 years, a B2B marketing leader in charge of the global content marketing and editorial organization at LinkedIn's 5 billion ads business. Please welcome a B2B marketer with style and substance, Steve Kearns, Global Head of Content for Marketing Solutions at LinkedIn. Great to see you, Steve.
You too, Lee. Thanks so much for having me. Excited to kick off today.
Awesome. So you've just returned from Cannes, and I'm feeling all kinds of FOMO. I think a lot of people are. Every year, everyone sees all the photos being shared on LinkedIn of all the amazing content and fun that's being had there. How was the experience? And I'm also curious, what were some of the big themes that emerged there?
Yeah, so this is, I would say, either my eighth or ninth opportunity to attend Cannes Lions, and I feel very grateful that as I first started out my career, one of the events that I was able to attend and sit across early on was the Cannes Lions Festival, which is kind of like the pinnacle of what many people wait their whole careers to attend if you're are in creative spaces, marketing and advertising. So. Um, have been to a number of different Cannes Lions. I think I have a good point of reference around how this year was versus how previous years were. If you think about the themes that were super pervasive this year at Cannes, we obviously AI. So there's a conversation where you couldn't go more than a second or two on the Croisette, which is kind of like the main drag of where everything happens in Cannes, without hearing, a talk about AI, hearing a, marketing leader talking about how they're leveraging AI, hearing an activation that has messaging of AI will transform your organization on the Croisette. So I think there's a lot of conversation about how AI will transform our craft, both from the, analytical side and the strategy piece all the way down to kind of the creative and what we actually produce. So I'd say there's some optimism there. There's some anxiety there. And then, of course, there's I would say, complementary conversation, which is, well, what the heck actually happens with all of the people? Because if you're going to have an AI tool or software or workflow that is going to help you automate something like content creation, what's going to happen to all the people that actually created the content before? What are we going to be doing with our time? So lots of talk about sort of that technological revolution that we're in, but then also the, skills revolution that we're in as a result of that as well. So incredible time spent at Cannes. I think any marketer, anyone who works in business who gets the opportunity to fly to the south of France with your job to go meet and network with 20 plus thousand other marketers, like that is just an incredible opportunity. So every year I come back feeling inspired and energized around that. I just feel very lucky to work among this community of creative professionals who get together in Cannes every year.
Fantastic. So, LinkedIn was behind the creative B2B part of Cannes Lion. I'm curious if you can talk a little bit about how that came about and what does that mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So LinkedIn is, I work on behalf of LinkedIn's advertising business. We are, years ago when I first joined the business, I'm coming up now on 9 years with LinkedIn. We were a very, I would say, nascent player in the advertising space. So, this was back in like the 2015s, 2016s, where it was the rise of the big tech and social media platforms. So you had the Facebooks of the world previously, before it was even called Meta. You had Twitter, you had Instagram, you had Snapchat. The big players at the time in social media, they were dominating the conversation at Cannes because they were some of the biggest, platform side or publisher side, advertising platforms that there were. So at the time, LinkedIn was a very, I would say, powerful member platform, but we weren't necessarily as powerful of an advertising platform. And I remember going to Cannes at the very beginning of my time with LinkedIn, and we were kind of like the little engine that could. So we were focused on, okay, how do we book as many meetings as possible? How do we get in front of as many CMOs as possible? And how do we just like tell our story, tell our story, tell our story? But we didn't have really the resources to do it, and we didn't quite have the like market support or context that we now have to be able to do that. Over time, what we've realized is that the kind of sweet spot for LinkedIn and LinkedIn advertising specifically are B2B companies. So LinkedIn is the world's largest professional network, more than 1.2 billion members who come to the platform globally to, give and get help. It's a crazy number, just to think about the scale of this thing. And we realized that the sweet spot for us is going to be companies that are looking to reach that professional audience. So that's kind of how we landed on this B2B positioning. And over time, we said, okay, if Cannes is the largest event in the world for marketing and advertising professionals, happens once a year, and we know we have this B2B positioning, what is the gap or opportunity that we want to identify here? And the gap or opportunity we identified was that, uh, you know, B2B did not have a home at Cannes. And this was also happening as, SaaS companies, platforms, what have you, again, in the 2015s to 2020, started to really accelerate in terms of their market cap, in terms of the amount of money they had to spend on marketing and advertising. Uh, so we kind of rode that B2B tech boom or wave, if you will, and landed on sort of this B2B positioning that we started to push at Cannes. Now, how does that actually translate into the awards and the B2B Creative Lions? We were a partner of the Cannes Lions Festival and actually saying, you know what, we believe that, if we're the platform for B2B and a lot of great B2B marketing is happening on LinkedIn, we want to make sure that we see B2B work be recognized on this global stage at Cannes Lions. So that is where we worked with the Lions organization specifically to build an awards category for creative B2B work. And I believe we're now in our third year of that creative B2B. It's either the third or fourth year of the creative B2B Lions. And it's been great to see the work that's kind of bubbled up to the top there. I mean, it's not always work that was necessarily done or primarily executed on LinkedIn. So when you think about sort of that category leadership versus the specific, I don't know, bottom line business result that we're seeking. It's always this interesting tension point for us because, it's something that I have to sell in my role. It's like, look, if we want to be the category leader in B2B, then we need to think about how we show up in spaces like Cannes, even if the winner of the B2B Lions isn't necessarily always going to have done it primarily on LinkedIn. So that's as you think about how we own the category, how we become the thought leaders in the space, that's just something that I've always found curious about this and something that I think, listeners of this podcast might find interesting as well.
It is. It's you're investing in those future buyers, right? LinkedIn's own the B2B the stats that B2B Institute throws out about 95% are not in market, 5% are. So, you need to make those investments for future cash flow. Um, so can you drill down a little bit into your role? Because I mean, you had a pretty consistent escalation, elevation, advancement in positions at LinkedIn, and I'm just kind of curious if you can kind of explain to folks a little more about your role, in terms of how you're overseeing and what where marketing solutions fits in the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. So, LinkedIn has people always ask me how does LinkedIn make money? And it's a great question because it's not something that I was entirely clear on before I came to work here either. So, LinkedIn has a number of different revenue streams. So essentially, we have our member or consumer platform, which you and I know as LinkedIn members. Many of the listeners will know as LinkedIn members. You come to LinkedIn to um, share content that's professionally oriented, to find your next opportunity, network with professionals that you work with currently, who you want to meet, in a future state, who you've worked with before. And that sort of thriving member ecosystem actually enables us to, on the B2B side, have a lot of solutions that are really valuable offerings for B2B companies. So everything from LinkedIn Recruiter, which allows recruiters to get in touch with those LinkedIn members, who are recruiting for roles. LinkedIn Sales Navigator, which is our primary B2B sales platform for sales professionals. We have a premium business. So if you're a LinkedIn member and you would like to get access to things like in-mail credits or additional profile insights, we have that as a revenue stream. And then we have our marketing solutions business as well. So that is your traditional, what you think of as native advertising. How we're different from, I would say, the other platforms in our competitive set from an advertising perspective is we actually have multiple revenue streams that sit outside of advertising. So it's an interesting, I would say, blessing and a curse because our business is much more diverse, meaning it's a really healthy business. At the same time, it also means that where we sit in ads marketing, we, we're different than a Meta, or we're different than X or a Reddit or whatever, that, the majority of their P&L is actually focused on delivering ads. So, their whole organization is built around this concept of like ads marketing and getting in touch with advertisers. So we have to do a little bit of more of, I would say, like internal marketing to make sure that folks across the rest of the business and across our revenue streams really understand um, kind of the ethos of how you operate in an advertising business, the tactics you need to take on in order to actually grow the business and connect with the right audiences, what have you. Now, in terms of what I'm responsible for. So I joined LinkedIn about 9 years ago, specifically to build out our social media program for our advertising business. So the previously, before coming to LinkedIn, I had a little bit more of a consumer marketing background. I'm from Los Angeles originally, and I worked in, film, music, and TV, as many people from that side of the country do. I'm not based in New York City, so have kind of done a 180 in terms of like lifestyle and climate and what have you. But the one of the things that I had previously worked in kind of entertainment marketing and PR, doing social events, what have you, and made the pivot into B2B, still kind of working in that, like I would say, media and ad space, because a lot of entertainment companies kind of adopt the same business model of, advertisers are kind of your bread and butter. So I would say I kept the audience consistent, but the medium changed, or I'm working for a platform company now. So built out the social media program. It was surprising at the time that LinkedIn actually didn't really have much of an owned social media presence. So that was always kind of one of my big gripes when I first came in. I was like, look, we're selling LinkedIn ads. We need to be the best in class use case of both organic and paid programs on our platform. And over the last 9 years, I think we've really met that charter. So in that 9 years, my role, then grew to look over ownership of all of our own channels, and then eventually our content marketing organization. And I would kind of describe what we're accountable for in three buckets. So number one, we have to raise awareness that LinkedIn has an ads business. So the most people, especially folks who are not in the advertising world, think of LinkedIn as a place to go for jobs and skills. Uh, Not untrue, but we also have a really powerful advertising platform built off the back of that, which is something that not everybody knows that we have. So that's a task for the team. If we do a good job at that, we then get into that consideration use case where we will look at how do we actually convince advertisers that advertising on LinkedIn is a good idea and that they should build their brand on a platform like LinkedIn as opposed to those in our competitive set. The Reddits of the world, the Twitters of the world, the Metas of the world, et cetera. And then ultimately, we have to provide resources for our advertisers to be successful with our products such that they can continue to grow their business with LinkedIn, continue to succeed with the solutions. And, ultimately that reduces churn, that keeps them coming back, and that ensures that, their success is our success and vice versa. So how do we do all of that? We do that through content. So content is the medium through which we can kind of accomplish these goals across the funnel. So we look after our owned organic channels, our LinkedIn for Marketing blog, our flagship social platform, which is our LinkedIn page. We look after a lot of top of funnel content on our microsite, so our web presence. And then we also look after owned content for things like our events. So the idea is that we are kind of the megaphone for the advertising business, and we take all of the various stories and messages that we need to own, and then we make sure they get into the hands of the right people via the scaled digital and experiential channels that we look after.
That's a great, description. I think there's a lot of folks that had pieces of that puzzle, but not the whole thing. So thanks for sharing that.
Of course.
I think that that's really, really informative. So, I've always known you as a very strategic, business-minded thinker, but at the same time, you've got a lot of, your roots in data, or your app, or at least in your day-to-day, you've got some responsibilities there. And on top of all that, strategy and data is your ability to tell stories. And it just seems to me that these are three things that are especially valuable right now. And I'm just wondering if you can drill down into how something like this combination of strategy and data and storytelling are particularly timely for B2B marketers that want to excel in their roles.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's interesting because I think, generally speaking, you've got people who are strong with kind of data and analytics, and then you have people who are strong with storytelling. Like, generally speaking, those skill sets don't naturally cross over. because you've got your creative mind who wants to tell the stories and thinks in color and emotion and feeling. And then you have your people who can look at a spreadsheet and say, well, this is objectively good and this is objectively bad. And this is the trajectory that needs to keep us going up and to the right. And in my experience, I would say maybe some people have both naturally. If so, I'd like to meet them. But usually you're more inclined toward one versus the other. And the journey of the challenge of our lives as B2B marketers is how do you actually hone both? Because both are going to be really important. So the most successful people I see in this field are both great storytellers and are able to understand how they can translate those stories into meaningful business outcomes. So the flywheel goes something like this. You start with kind of a business insight or a strategic insight that that your, let's say, content or your marketing or what have you should be able to be an answer to. So you need to have that foundational business and strategy understanding at the outset of this to say, great, this is the problem we're trying to solve. Then you have to bring in the creative brain, which says, okay, how do I actually translate this into something compelling, a set of key messages, a content rollout, an event, a paid media campaign, whatever that is. And then you have to be able to look back at that over time and say, were we successful with this based on these set of metrics that we're going to use to demonstrate our success? And that, like, 1 to 2 to 3 is very hard to do, especially as marketing teams are under more pressure than ever. But it's
Yeah.
something that I think is kind of going to be critical for all marketers going forward. Like, there's more revenue pressure than ever on the marketing function, especially in B2B.
Hmm.
So, there is there's both I would say, baseline need for every B2B marketer to be good at strategy and analytics. AI can certainly be helpful with that. But then there is a over the top, what not everyone's good at, which I think people like myself and my team bring to the table, which is that storytelling, which, you know, if you combine those two things, you actually become a really killer marketer. Now, I've seen people on both ends of the spectrum. If you don't hone those, I would say, two skill sets, I've seen people become dead in the water. You can be the greatest storyteller in the world if you have no um, if you can't figure out how the story that you tell actually translates into measurable outcomes, you're screwed. And then if you're a, spreadsheet style thinker and you can't figure out how to get that work out of the spreadsheet and into the hands of your customer such that they actually do something with that work, you're also dead in the water. So that's where it's kind of this constant, like, up leveling, if you will, of making sure that you're able to kind of have both of those skill sets. It's not to say that you can't necessarily be stronger in one than the other. I think I am a stronger storyteller than I am a data analyst. I mean, I still cannot do, like, basic addition and subtraction, but I guess thank God for technology there. But it's something that I always think about, of how I make sure that I am grounding the creative work that we do in sort of the measurable business outcomes that we can achieve.
Right. And it's that appreciation for the fact that these are the skills necessary in order to succeed. And whether you have them or not, you can take action on either upskilling yourself or finding the talent around you
Exactly.
to complement. Yep.
Exactly.
You know, another thing about you, that I think is pretty awesome is that you have this great sense of style, and I think that, in a way, translates to something I've been seeing in conversations around B2B marketing a lot more lately, and that is the idea of taste, which, really, when you think about it, it's something that it really helps differentiate, a lot of talented marketers in this age of AI, right? And I'm just wondering, for you, what role does taste play in great B2B marketing?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think about it's funny, whenever I talk to someone who is just getting into the marketing and advertising space, meaning marketing to marketers, I always tell them, I think there's a lot of basics that apply when if you're marketing to sales professionals, if you're marketing to the CFO, if you're marketing to, someone else in the buying group in the B2B space, there's basic fundamentals of B2B marketing that still apply across all of those lenses. Now, when you're marketing to marketers, something that really does come to mind is the need to, be a little bit of a tastemaker or have a little bit of flair or have a little bit of style because you are marketing primarily to creative professionals who, their bullshit meter is super, super high. So you think about you need to create something unique and differentiated that is going to be memorable, and you have to build kind of that memory structure with your audiences. So the I think that translates both into the personal and professional. Like every year I go to Cannes, it's not a normal business event. It is, you see CMOs walking down the closet who are in like the most like phenomenal outfits you've ever seen. And, I do think that translates into how a lot of us look after our work because the most successful people, whether you're in consumer marketing or in B2B marketing, realize that what you are building is you are building something with taste and style and, not to be like ostentatious about it. It's more just that you're building a memory structure and you're building something unique that people can then recall. And, something that I think is super, super interesting about like marketing in general is it's rooted so much in psychology and it's rooted so much in aspiration. The most successful brands tend to be those that have a clear set of values, a clear visual identity, a clear uh, kind of alignment to their audience, such that an audience member can say, or a potential customer can say, hey, this brand either fits my current values or fits the values that I want to have. Hey, I actually want to be more interesting. I want to be more of a thought leader. I want to be more stylish. I want to have more interesting perspectives. I want to go to an event like Cannes. I want to show up as the cool B2B marketer. And over time, you start to see people tend to align with that, which actually translates into more measurable outcomes. You create that like brand fame, if you will, and that memorability, which is so much. We've done a million studies on this. It's so much more effective than if you're actually selling to someone on features or selling to someone on price.
Yeah, it's like that expression, "Facts tell, stories sell," right? You know, and I think it's System 1 that does this ongoing research on the distinctive marketing assets, and LinkedIn itself is talking about and done research and shared the value of distinctive assets and brand and storytelling creativity, and it's really like this pressure to perform kind of puts people in this position of mechanical, automated, scalable marketing when really to have meaningful marketing, that's where the investments are gonna show the most return, or it appears to be that's where they're showing the return, so
It's always interesting. Like I think the if I could have my cross-functional partners take any sort of like course or learning or what have you, it would not be around marketing fundamentals. It would be around psychology and anthropology. So, if the best marketers understand why people do what they do. And generally speaking, it's not because eh, it's the right thing to do. Not always. I mean, sure, there's some element of that, but a lot of times it is because it is the most socially acceptable thing to do, or the thing that might elevate them the most, or the thing that is going to make them look the coolest, or looks the most credible, or something of that nature. So the second you understand the irrational components of what drive decision making and what drive human behavior, the more effective of a marketer you become because then you can look at things not as they should be, but as they are. And that's the difference between sort of that left and right brain thinking is you've got the spreadsheet folks that are looking at things the way that they should be. And then you build a marketing campaign that is meant to address the rational components of the way things should be and the way people buy and should buy in B2B, and then it falls flat. And people say, "Well, you know, wait a minute, why did this end up the way that it did? Why didn't it work? Because all of the data says it's gonna work." Um, and then you're like, "Well, this doesn't take into account the intangibles of human behavior that are actually gonna change the model." So, that's where I've just always been fascinated by that human behavior and how we can kinda tap into sort of some of those, like, intangible decision making, uh, components as B2B marketers.
it's interesting because I've been building out the sort of best answer marketing 2.0 model for our own, point of view, and actually recently published, because after doing some research on what we call the B2B laws of attraction, and it's rooted in psychology and just kind of connecting the dots between human behavior and their interaction in the B2B information journey, of what helps inspire people to,
Yeah.
discover, consume, and act on information. Anyway, um, so this all adds up to great marketing, and as far as that goes, you and your team have really produced and in fact award-winning efforts that have generated substantial revenue for the LinkedIn business. And I'm just kind of curious if there's a particular campaign or program that you're most proud of that you and your team have executed on.
Yeah, so I think, there's 2 that I'll share. So, the first is our work around the, B2B marketing benchmark report. So, I'll give a shout out to Kia Burt, who's one of my colleagues, who actually pitched this
Yeah.
report to me, a few years back, and it's been something that she had wanted to do in previous, iterations of her career and never really found the right organization to be kinda the home for this, and LinkedIn ended up being the right home for it. Essentially what the B2B marketing benchmark is it is LinkedIn's POV on, what is going on in the B2B marketing universe. So I would say, uh, one of the utilities of a place like LinkedIn is that we have both the topic authority, the data, and I mean, I guess you can add a third thing to that, and the funds and sort of the gravitas of our brand to be able to give people a definitive point of view on what is going on in the space. So that is something that was kind of the brief or the insight that we started on with the B2B marketing benchmark is how do we become, in this goal of generating B2B topic authority, B2B marketing topic authority, how do we become the definitive resource and definitive guide for what is going on in the minds of the B2B marketer? What keeps them up at night? What are they doing? What are the best in the industry doing? What are the laggards, not doing enough of that they could be doing more of? So the benchmark report was really kind of born out of that need to build this topic authority for LinkedIn, and we partnered with Ipsos to create this report, and we are now in its third year of going live, and just the returns that we've gotten on this thing have been incredible. It gives us sort of a thought leadership, kind of foundational platform from which we can tell our stories. We start every story with an insight, usually from the benchmark. Um, it's gotten us a ton of press. It brings people into our universe, and it also gives the marketing organization something that they can really use in their storytelling efforts. So that's been huge. I would say the other thing is the presence that we built at Cannes. So it's funny how like roles can kind of become a little bit of like self-fulfilling prophecies where things that didn't exist now exist because you were in the space. I previously worked in kind of red carpet events and PR before I came to LinkedIn. And so naturally I always gravitated toward this idea of events. So once I got the opportunity to work on Cannes, I was like, oh well, I understand this. I have both a production background and a content background. And what was born out of that was something that we call the LinkedIn studio. So the best way that I can describe it is like if you think about how NBC will go to the Olympics and they'll cover it. That is what we do at marketing and advertising events now. So, marketing and advertising people love to talk about themselves. Take a case in point, and love to talk about their craft. Like nobody loves to talk about marketing and advertising more than marketing and advertising people. So we use that insight as a way to not only capture content at these big events, but then also democratize the distribution of that content for people who can't attend. And we also use it as I would say, carrot to engage people to learn more about LinkedIn and build their relationship with LinkedIn. So it helps us create content, it helps us book meetings. But essentially, what we do is we go to Cannes, we set up a broadcast quality studio, and we will stream content from the week for distributed audiences. We'll bring people in for one on one interviews. The names that we have brought through our studio over the last 5, 10 years have been truly unbelievable. We've watched the studio scale over time, and now that model is actually something that all of LinkedIn uses to take to its events across lines of business, across revenue streams. Because again, if you think about the psychological structures that actually motivate people to buy, um, it's a huge opportunity to get people in front of a camera, make them feel special, also co-create IP with them. Then they go have a meeting with our sales team. And whether or not they buy something at the end of that meeting is one thing, but they build the relationship. And over time, what I now have is every January, and this is like 6 months out from Cannes, I have the comms people and the chief of staffs and even some of the executives themselves of the top CMOs in B2B proactively reach out to me to say, "Hey, Steve, when can we get in your studio for Cannes? What are your plans this year? We want to co-create with you." And if we talk about, if you think about like from an ABM perspective or whatever, the signals, how strong of a signal is that when you are getting to a place where you are not, most marketers are in this push mindset. Let's push, let's push, let's push, let's get someone to, take the demo or, take the call or whatever. When you get into the pull mentality, that is a much stronger signal of demand and purchase intent and what have you, that like if you were doing it through just like direct marketing or whatever, would cost so much money.
Yes.
So that's where I try to explain that to people who are, wear the finance hats in the organization. I'm like, what other structure is getting us direct proactive outreach from a CMO who could be doing anything else with their day and has a million and one other things to do, but they make time to want to, in the 40 hours they have at Cannes, spend 5 of those 40, which is a huge percentage of their time with LinkedIn creating content. What does that mean about how much they value our relationship, how much they value the services that we bring to them, and our role in getting them where they need to go from a marketing perspective. So the question that I always ask the organization is how do we then capitalize on that um, in a way that continues to drive the momentum after the event?
Yeah, absolutely. That is really the opportunity, isn't it? Because as you've got this slice of time during the event, but then really where the productivity probably comes into play is the foundation you built there in person and those real world experiences, and then what you do with that content after the fact.
Exactly.
That's great. So what about brands, B2B brands that are, doing well, killing it, so to speak, on LinkedIn? Are there examples there that you can share?
Yeah. So one that I want to spotlight is ServiceNow. So there's a group of folks who used to be at Salesforce, and were kind of the catalyst of, what at the time I think was the strongest B2B brand out there. So Salesforce was always kind of the pinnacle, like Fortune 500 example of a B2B brand that moved beyond kind of feature telling and actually built a brand and an ethos for themselves. So they had the whole Trailblazer brand that was, showcased across digital. It showed up in their events, their experiential presence at Dreamforce. It threaded through their out of home, really everything they did kind of took on this brand identity. Their customer communities were branded Trailblazer. The whole idea was that the you created a hero like halo effect around the B2B marketer or the B2B seller or, CRM or operator or whomever, and, branded them as trailblazers. So that way, and then of course you added in like a cool motif to that of like outdoors and what have you. And that's the kind of stuff that like consumer brands have always done. B2B brands never played around with. So a lot of those Salesforce folks have now made their way over to ServiceNow. And you can see, Salesforce still has this really great, strong brand. Um, you now also see that kind of that world starting to be built out at ServiceNow because it's people who clearly understand that you need to create kind of this halo effect around your brand. So I've watched the team at ServiceNow go bigger and better than ever. I was actually with a few of them at Cannes last
Yeah,
week.
I
Colin
saw that.
Fleming, who's
Yeah,
their
Colin is amazing.
he's amazing. Jim Lesser, who's their chief brand officer, were chatting to me about how, and Colin was ex Salesforce. Jim, I think, has been with them with ServiceNow a little bit longer, but previously was at BBDO on the agency side. Um, they really understand that you need to build these kind of emotional structures with your audience, and how I've seen them show up both on LinkedIn, but then at their, experiential moments and what have you, there is a, you know, swagger there. There's an emotional, component there of saying, hey, ServiceNow is leading this revolution that is really starting to deliver returns. So it's cool to see I think what started at Salesforce is now kind of this like diaspora. What starts to then show up in other companies as people led on to, hey, this is something that can actually deliver us the returns that we need. And you're investing in sort of that long term kind of brand and pipeline building, if you will.
Yeah, and that is the strategic perspective there is, I think, a really, really important. It's kind of like, there's this sort of debate that's been happening a long time in B2B, and that is, brand versus demand, where we know the answer is both, right? And I'm kind of curious what insights you can bring about full funnel, right? Um, what is it that people should be thinking about when they're planning out, the kind of programs that can have the kind of impact that you're talking about ServiceNow is doing across the customer experience?
I think it's looking at, you need to really look at this idea of how do I build momentum? So and this becomes really hard in big organizations. You have, I would say, pockets of really great work, but it's not always a given that those pockets of great work are connected. So if you think about, I think Can is a good example in the LinkedIn studio. The That in a box is like effective. Um, is it, the most effective thing it could be if you don't end up doing something like the follow through? No. So, what could that follow through look like? And I'm trying to ground this in like a little bit more of a tangible example. So I'm not just like, yeah, full funnel marketing is important, and you should connect your brand to demand at the end. Like, okay, we have this studio example which we talked about. You've got a list of CMOs who came to the studio. Low hanging fruit is an obvious follow up from the marketing leader, but also from, the sales contact. What else can you do? You can then think about taking those individuals, or let's say individuals who sit in the organization of that CMO who we talked to. And you make sure that from an ABM perspective, they are included in some kind of marketing trip. Because if you think about how these conversations go. Everything in the world and in business is about signaling. So a CMO comes home from the LinkedIn studio and they say, I had a really great experience working with LinkedIn. They have a great content ecosystem. They're doing great things over there. We should learn more. They then post a video that they've recorded at the studio on their LinkedIn profile. Everyone in their organization is going to see that. So every director of marketing who's thinking about how do I make my CMO happy? How do I, get on board with the things that they want to do, sees that video. Um, they should then, if they're in a retargeting kind of workflow, they should also then see more messaging from LinkedIn. They should see, how our solutions can help them actually accomplish their goals in addition to their CMO's goals. I mean, obviously they should be the same, but like we know in big organizations that everyone's got a little bit of like a fiefdom and is worried about their own thing and their own survival. So it's that where you have to think about the pull through of if you have any sort of engagement or touch point, what is the next thing and the next thing and the next thing that actually brings folks closer to that purchase. And that's the part that I think most organizations really fall flat on. And we don't always get it right at LinkedIn, and we're the ones who like preach that you should be doing this. So it's something that the more you can foster the expectation that things are not done in a silo or done in isolation, and that they're actually meant to drive momentum over time across various teams and various mediums and various funnel stages, I think the better off that you end up being.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the always on rationale in that, the buyer doesn't really care what your fiscal year or quarterly cycle is for marketing investments that will generate the kind of information that's useful to them, right? They've got their own problems on their own timeline. So that what you're describing is a relationship builder that develops familiarity through relevance and utility and creates relevance really over time.
Yeah.
And then the payoff is so much better for everybody involved.
Yeah, absolutely.
So LinkedIn has, and I think this kind of connects a little bit too, because thought leadership is something that LinkedIn has really been an advocate of in the B2B space. And I mean, there's even ad products like thought leadership ads and other kinds of ads you can buy to support brand thought leadership on the LinkedIn platform. And I'm just kind of curious, do you feel, I have a, this is kind of a leading question, I suppose now, but is thought leadership as important today, as when LinkedIn started advocating so enthusiastically about it?
Yeah, so I think, Imagine if my answer was no. No, I think thought leadership is absolutely more important today. Couple of reasons. So, number 1, if you look at where thought leadership was super like, I remember when thought leadership first kind of hit the scene, and or at least the term thought leadership hit the scene. Like, I was this was years ago, I was sitting in a PR class, and I had a professor who, because I went to school for PR. I was sitting in a PR class and had a professor who was a, kinda Silicon Valley PR guy, and he said, "Hey, one of the things that's becoming more important in the PR space is this concept of thought leadership." It was sweeping Silicon Valley at the time because companies were realizing that they had to be thought leaders in defining where their space was going, because um, the more the more thought leadery you can be, the more influence you start to build, the more credible your solutions become. So that's kind of I literally remember the first time that the word thought leadership was brought up to me, because I was like, that's a strange word. Like, what does this mean? And then over time, I realized like it's become critical to what it is I do over the last 15 years, which is just funny how that all works. But there was a gap before thought leadership came onto the scene, that was filled by this need to develop, or this desire to develop topic authority. So that was kind of how it came to be. Then I think we got into like the thought leadership glut, where everyone realized that this is important. And now we're actually seeing like an attack on thought leadership. And I don't know that it's necessarily an intentional attack on thought leadership, but it happens because of market dynamics. So there's a couple of things that I think are causing this. Number 1 is, uh, the, introduction of AI onto the scene. So now that AI can create templatized, scaled content, uh, the answer from the corner office from the CFO is great. I can now reduce my content production budgets by 80, 85% because AI can replace everything, and, it's a panacea. And what that results in, just by nature of that whole workflow happening, is you don't get that kind of human-centric thought leadership that only folks like ourselves can produce, because it takes into account the forward-thinking, creative, contrarian perspectives that machine learning hasn't quite figured out how to like replicate just yet. So that's one thing. The other thing is also the interest, the kind of macro interest rate environment. In the inflationary periods, or the economic stagnation that we've looked at over the last couple of years, means that things like thought leadership are very hard to quantify in terms of like immediate outcomes. 3 months from now, this $500,000 thought leadership output is going to get us $1.5 million in closed one revenue. Like, that's not possible. I mean, if it's possible, again, someone please come find me. I would love to hire you, because we have that same challenge at LinkedIn. So what you're seeing now is almost this like dip in companies investing in thought leadership. And that's kind of why I get to my answer of why it's more important than ever. Because you are going to see the vast majority of the market say, thought leadership's not important. Um, this machine, this AI tool can do everything we need it to do. And what you're gonna see is like most of the market's gonna head in that direction. And you're gonna see a lot of scaled, like pretty high quality, but not really unique content. And then you're going to have the holdouts. And those holdouts are going to say, hey, I recognize the value of having 90% of my content be sort of this like AI generated content, but that 10%, which is going to speak to the executive, it's going to speak to the press, it's going to speak to all of those things, which again have that really high bullshit meter. Um, that's gonna become even more unique and commoditized. So that's where I see the companies that are able to stay the course on thought leadership, and I don't think there's gonna be many, quite honestly, uh, are going to be those ones that are successful, because everything's cyclical. So you go, "Hey, need for thought leadership." Everyone does thought leadership. Thought leadership peaks. Now this is a waste of money. Then you start to see the decline, and then all of a sudden you're gonna start see that ticking up again when people realize that, an entirely AI generated content marketing strategy, and I use the word entirely with intention, because there's absolutely a time and a place for it. We use a lot of AI in our content creation workflows ourselves, is not going to be an effective one.
Right. Well, I very much appreciate your answer, only because if for nothing else, it's great advice. And also, we are very, on our for our part, at our company, we're very much leaning into, original research and thought leadership as a cornerstone, perspective in terms of market engagement. The intersection of influence and social and content and even SEO for that matter. And actually, we're fielding a study starting this week where we're starting to capture survey responses in partnership with Ascend2 on that. So that'll be fun to see when that comes out. Speaking of SEO, though, of course, I'm biased about this, but LinkedIn Marketing Solutions has seen quite a bit of productivity from organic search over the years. And with AI impacting everything, right? From the way Google works to the way consumers and buying committees source vendors and solutions and that sort of thing. What directional advice can you give for marketers that are feeling a little bit unsure about how to proceed with, attracting new customers through search?
Yeah, so it is an interesting time. Like I feel like I was not an expert in SEO. I mean, I still wouldn't call myself an expert in SEO, but I was able to take on a number of different roles at LinkedIn that gave me enough knowledge to be dangerous. Like I'm now in charge of it in part. So there's another team that I partner with who are like the true SEO experts, but we're the channel owners. So we have to know enough about SEO in order to have that, benefit our ecosystem, our traffic. Uh, I'm kind of annoyed by it because I'm like, shoot, just as I became an expert in SEO where Google was the primary player, like, shoot, like, no, that's not a thing anymore. Their business is kind of eroding because of all the other ways that people are searching. But the flip side of that, or the positively associated way to look at that, is we're in an era where I think the playing field has been leveled once again, where we're all now students of this, I would say, evolving like consumer and B2B buyer search behavior. So the search ecosystem is a lot more fragmented than it was a couple of years ago. So, and it's actually a really interesting like marketing challenge and opportunity because previously, I'd say 3, 4 years ago, you said, okay, Google's the main player. You need to build a keyword strategy, or you need to build a content strategy which is rooted in a set of keywords you need to go after. Some that are kind of white space opportunities, others where you're a challenger in that space. You need to pump out a bunch of content that's highly credible, and you do it at a high frequency in order to tell the search engine that your content is credible. You knock it up in the search rankings, all of a sudden you get more traffic. So that's kind of the 101 playbook from all these years. Now, what happens when maybe that's one way of discovery, but people are doing TikTok search. Like I use TikTok now as a search engine, Reddit as a search engine, um, Chat GPT. Even Google started to incorporate like AI descriptions at the top of their search. So they're starting to evolve as well. And I don't have the answers for that, but I think my advice would be to understand how people are using these platforms to search, and then it's finding the SEO experts who are becoming really, uh, uh, astute in this space and saying, "Great, what are the actual structures that we can build from a, like, content marketing or, content ecosystem perspective that can help us get in front of these people in the way that they're searching?" Does that mean you need to have a more aggressive, uh presence on TikTok that also uses, keywords and various like search queries that are going to show up in that like top little bar once you open up the comments? Do you need to have a more, aggressive presence on a Reddit? Do you need to, it's the questions like that where it starts with the insight of how the consumer or the B2B buyer is actually behaving and using these tools to search that can then help you build out your approach to it.
Exactly. Well, a more diversified search behavior
Yes,
calls for a more diversified search visibility.
exactly.
And this is the central idea behind this best answer marketing thing I was talking or approach or point of view that I was talking about before. It's like be the best answer wherever your customer is looking. It's sort of a universal, timeless perspective, but it counts on the data. It relies on what you just said, understanding how are buyers now choosing to discover and consume information that might be different than before, and you simply adjust your approach accordingly, right? Um, and speaking of adjustments, LinkedIn has really, well, I wouldn't say it's an adjustment. It's just it's something that LinkedIn has really leaned into on the platform in terms of advocating for both video and now just recently with research, creators. So B2B, really popularizing and shining a light on this notion of bringing B2B creators on the platform because obviously there's an ad solution that connects with that as well. But I just wanna, so there's a lot of folks who feel good and comfortable about doing that sort of thing, and I props to Takia on your team and yourself and Alex, Rin, for leading the charge as we're walking the talk. But what about folks like me, who, despite intellectually fully understanding the value of shooting video and putting it up, are less than comfortable with doing that? I'd much rather talk with a smart person like yourself. But what advice do you have for B2B execs,
Hey,
to get their butts
we're
off?
you invited me to this podcast, so I think you're already stuff that you're already underselling yourself in terms of your adaptability to video. I would say it's like it's practice makes perfect, or getting comfortable with the medium. So, I remember the first time that I recorded myself, and I hate the sound of my own voice. It feels cringy to look at myself in the camera. Like, all of that is like, it's a pretty terrible first experience, and then you have to go and edit yourself, and I'm like, "Ah, this is brutal." And then you have to, like, post that, and it feels very, like, self-aggrandizing, and, we're not taught to do things like that. Now, think back 20, 25 years, search behavior on the internet was uncomfortable. The idea of, like, walking around with, like, headphones in or AirPods in, like, would have been strange. Like, you think about all these, like, technological innovations and behavior changes. Thinking about, like, having a phone in your hand at all times would have felt very strange. Why do I need this, like, piece of electronics in my hand at all times? 20, 25 years ago would have been, like, seemed totally foreign to us. So, it's this idea of, if you want to compete in this space, the consumer, like, behavior has already changed, meaning it's the TikTok era, it's the Instagram era, everything is visual. Everything is, either audio or video. How do you create for that medium? And I would say, just, like, just get started. There's a host of, I would say, free tools out there, or almost free tools out there, that can help you become a real expert in this pretty quickly. And again, I go back to that, like, leveled playing field analogy. Uh, this is like, you look at the opportunity of years ago, it was long form video. It was like YouTube. This is like 15 years ago, YouTube creators. And the people who got in on the ground level of that space became really successful, prolific, what have you. I think we're now in that era for short form video, especially short form professional video. So we might have, already kind of passed that peak with the consumer video, because there's, a saturation of, like, TikTok creators, if you will. But on the B2B side, like, you don't see a lot of B2B video creators, but because the content consumption trends are trending as such, you're going to see more of that, and it behooves us to get on the ground level of it, if that's a motivator at all.
Yeah, no, point taken. We'll see. We're gonna see it. I mean, I don't mean we'll see. We'll see me on and lots of other folks on LinkedIn with video. Yes, it's gonna happen. So you're in a high profile job, and I can only imagine the amount of pressure that there is for you and your team to perform, especially in a market conditions like we have right now. How do you stay motivated? Like what is it that inspires you?
I would say, um, it's the ability to have a outsized impact. So it's the double-edged sword of the more senior you become and the more influence you have, the more accountability you have as well. I think about, I have a lot less time and agency over my time than I used to even 9 years ago, and that feels like it's something I long for at times. Is, hey, I would like to have a quiet work day, or a work day that can end at 5 o'clock, and then I can, like, go for a walk in the park or something like that, which is just not the reality of, like, what this is anymore. At the same time, you think about, I think everyone in the world needs, like, a purpose and utility and what have you, and I feel very fortunate that, I have been able to translate, I think, what I bring to the table, which is, understanding how humans work and, the structure of human psychology, combining that with uh, storytelling and relationship building abilities. And, that translates very nicely into a role like mine. So, the fact that I can use that every day and apply myself and challenge myself and, solve problems on behalf of an organization that I actually do think is providing like a net positive service in the world, which is, connecting the world professionals to make them more productive and successful is incredibly motivating. And I think it's also looking at there have been, when you're in any sort of management job, you have the opportunity to eh, hopefully influence the outcomes of other people as well. So I've been able to partner with a group of really brilliant folks over the last number of years here at LinkedIn, and they have both made me a better professional because of areas that I might have been deficient in. And I think that I have also made them in certain ways better professionals. So the way that I look at my job right now is, I never went to business school. I couldn't like justify the expense, and I think that window has now passed me by. But I've always looked at my role at LinkedIn as a little bit of like a business school day in and day out because I'm learning the management 101 things every day. I am learning the talent development things every day. Um, and I share that with my team as well as I hope we can all build a portfolio of work together that not only delivers returns for LinkedIn, but makes us better professionals and better people, such that when we do leave LinkedIn, everyone will leave LinkedIn at some point, unless you become the CEO or CMO or like are happy in your job where you are, which are both wonderful things. I want people to have a body of work that they're proud of and that can help them get to the next thing. And I think we've done a really good job of that at LinkedIn. So that to me serves as a motivator. Quite honestly, like it's also just I've been around the world with LinkedIn. I've built relationships with people who like will be at my wedding one day. I was joking with Takia the other day, who's one of my colleagues, who kicked off the benchmark for us. I was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna have, like, 4 tables of LinkedIn people at my wedding." So it's gonna be a who's who of everyone we've worked with over the last decade or so. So, it's not to say it's easy. It's not to say that I think I'll be necessarily even in a leadership job for the rest of my life. Eventually, I'm sure I will, like, burn out and wanna go work on, like, a coffee farm. But, every once in a while, I dance with that idea. I'm like, "Huh, should I leave it all behind?" But, I mean, it's been an incredible journey, and, like, I'm just so grateful for, uh, not many people at this, like, age and career stage, or even to generally get the opportunity to do what I've done, even if it's been stressful, even if it's given me a few more wrinkles. I'm grateful for the journey.
Well, and I'm certainly grateful for having you taking the time to talk with me today, and certainly of having had the opportunity to work with you over the last many years. So,
Likewise, it's been
um,
fun.
where's the best place for people to connect with you? It's kind of a another simple, silly question, I suppose, but I take it it's on LinkedIn, or is there anywhere
Bingo.
else?
I was like, "Winner, winner, chicken dinner." No, it's absolutely on LinkedIn. One of the things that I'm gonna try to do more of, um, in kind of this next phase of my career is create more on LinkedIn. I used to be really good about it. Now I've fallen off. I maybe create a post for myself once every couple of weeks, if not months. I'd like to get back into the practice of daily content creation. So feel free to follow me on LinkedIn, connect with me on LinkedIn, and hopefully you will start to see me do what I am promising myself that I will do, which is create more on the platform.
Well, I think the community is gonna benefit from that, because you have a lot to share, and I appreciate what you've shared with me today, and, I know our community, appreciates it as much as I do. So thank you so much, Steve.
Thank you, Lee. This has been awesome.
I wanna thank you for tuning in to the Beyond B2B Marketing podcast. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss our next amazing guest, and remember, there's no better time than now to break free of boring B2B.